There's this strange movie that I saw once or twice. It's titled, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And there's a scene in this movie where three escaped convicts are rambling down the rural roads of Alabama somewhere. And they come across this young man with a guitar strapped to his back. And they said, maybe we should stop and give him a ride. So they do, and they bring him in, and they say, "What are you doing out here in the middle of nowhere?" And he said, "Well, just last night at midnight at these crossroads here, I sold my soul to the devil so I could learn how to play this guitar." And the men in the car were amazed. They said, "You have sold your God-given soul, your immortal soul, just to play this guitar?" And he responded, "Yeah, I wasn't using it anyways." Now, I've always thought that was kind of funny, but there's something sad about it too, isn't there? And I think it's the state of many people in this world. They're living by their exterior senses, living from the outside in rather than the inside out. And the result? Well, our interiors shrink and weaken, dominated by our senses. My first point is this: God designed us to live from the inside out. God designed us to live from the inside out. When God breathed into Adam his Ruach, the Ruach Elohim, the breath of God, he gave us spirit. And he became a soul. Adam was not only a soul, but he has a soul. The deepest part of us is our spirit. It's very mysterious. None of us can really plummet the depth of our spirits that God breathed into us. It's with our spirits that we had the deepest contact with God. And then God gave us a soul, and our souls are filled with all sorts of wonderful powers. They're called faculties, the faculties of the soul, like our memory, our imagination, our wills, our intellect. It goes on and on. All this is the furniture within us. And then he made our bodies with the five senses. Well, Eve's choice reversed what was originally to be the situation. She saw, she took, and she tasted. It's a deliberate decision of living by the senses, and it brings chaos to the interior. The soul is disturbed, the mind and the emotions, and the spirit is troubled, and God is shut out. We were designed so that our spirits will reach out to God through our souls and our bodies. Look around us. Everything in our culture is geared toward our senses, isn't it? Everything. And what is the result of those of us in this culture that are living by our senses? Supreme unhappiness. And there's no true and lasting joy. Now, I'd like to invite you to look at our psalm, Psalm 63. It's a magnificent psalm. You should go home and memorize it. The soul is referenced 3 times. In verse 1, "My soul thirsts for you." Verse 5, My soul is feasted as with marrow and fat. Verse 8, my soul clings to you. Notice how the whole being, body and soul, is directed to God. I love this verse. My soul thirsts for you, my flesh faints for you as in a dry and weary land where no water is. That is the Hebrew idea of worship. It's full-bodied, it's complete. Spirit, soul, and body. And what is the desire of this life in the Spirit? May I gaze, and the word gaze there is chazah. It's the technical term in the Hebrew for the beatific vision. May I gaze upon you in the sanctuary, seeing your power and glory. This is living from the inside out. The Spirit is directing the powers of the soul and the body to the supreme vision of God. This is what we're made for. And the result is joy. Joy. I love this in verse 7. For you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. We are designed to live from the inside out. Now, in our gospel today, if we turn to our gospel, you all brought your Bibles here today, I can see. Anyways, Jesus gives the disciples a test. He asked the disciples, hey, what are people saying about me? And the disciples come up with various answers, and then Peter comes up with this. Jesus asked, who do you say that I am? And he came out with the right answer. He said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, you think that he would be rewarded for giving the right answer, right? Matter of fact, in Matthew, where you have a fuller account, Jesus said, blessed are you, Simon, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you. Kind of a pat on the back, right? But immediately right here, it is said that Jesus rebuked him and them. The same word that Jesus used when he rebuked the chaos of the sea. Man, how would you feel about that? Getting the right answer and getting slapped in the face. Why a rebuke for answering correctly? Well, Jesus was seeing Peter's interpretation. Jesus was seeing interpretation here. Peter must have been thinking, my, we hit the lottery. And we're in it from the ground up. Jesus has come and straightened out the world, and we're right in his train, right in his entourage. It's going to be great, fellas. That, by the way, is living from the outside in. Jesus sensed this, and he immediately tells them what his messiahship means. It means crucifixion. And he invites them to the same. Look at verses 23 and 24. If any man would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake, he will save it. This is the short and simple way of reversing a life that's dominated by the senses. And it can be approached in a negative way and a positive way. The negative way would be denying your will that bows to self and sensual fulfillment. But in a positive way, it can be looked at this. Follow Jesus into your interiors. We cannot go deep into our interiors by ourselves. But Jesus is waiting for us to invite him into our interior. And he will rearrange our souls to live from the spirit into the soul, which would govern our senses and our bodies. I remember when I was younger, I remember a December eve night. It was very dark out and cold, and I noticed by looking over a bridge in the water that there were little bugs. Believe it or not, little water bugs. You know what those, I don't know what they call them, but they seem to have little pads on their feet, and they skirt across the top of the water. I was amazed at first, that they could live in such cold, but I thought about them. I said to myself, they just live on the surface. They don't have an idea of what's beneath. They don't have an idea of what's above them, of the big world above them. They're living shallow. They're living shallow life. And when we live by our senses, we live a shallow life. God, in our readings today, is inviting us to a deeper life. Let me conclude with a quote from St. Augustine, who must have been meditating on this great psalm, Psalm 63. Give me a man in love. Give me one who yearns. Give me one who is hungry. Give me one far away in the desert, who is thirsty and sighs for the springs eternal. Give me that sort of man. He knows what I mean.